Kicking this off, Reg, and we just talked about the context, set the stage for getting into it, getting into the meat of the episode today. Quick housekeeping items, guys. You will get a recording of the episode after today. All these episodes, the previous two episodes from the series, the one that we did in July related to gross margins and fundamentals of business, and related to the sales process, how we can speed that up, that we did in August. Both of those are already live on SiteRecon YouTube channel. You can go and see it. You can also go and watch today's episodes in a couple of days, and all the future episodes that you're seeing here will be posted to our YouTube channel. If you look at your Zoom toolbar, you will see a couple of buttons down there. There is a button for Q&A. If you don't see it as a button, click on the More button, and you will see Q&A option right there on top. Click on it and ask your questions. We'll take them up one by one, and we'll answer them. If you have any comments, please feel free to use the chat window to start the discussion. So this episode today is for sales leaders who want to crush their sales goals in 2024 and beyond. Teams that are growth oriented, willing to weaponize pricing to win more business. Owners, operations leaders, account managers, business developers, and team leads who are willing to do the work to scale the business, but aren't exactly sure how to do it. The thing is, estimating systems are never easy to set up, but once they're set up the right way, then you can just reap benefits from it literally for generations, because if you make money, kids will have money. So that's, as a business owner, very true. Fred, do you have a comment on that?
No, I mean, it's anybody that's involved with establishing pricing, working in the estimating process, setting budgeted hours goals, things of that nature. This series pertains to those folks, anybody who's involved in that, because those are the folks that are helping scale the business, and they're the ones that will benefit significantly from this estimating tool.
100%. So as we get into it, Fred, just to time ourselves right, I think we've got more or less 40 minutes to wrap this up, and we can stretch to 45, but guys, we'll try to wrap the content in that time. Stick around. Let's get into it. So some of the things that come up when we are thinking about estimating, of course, it takes time away from activities that help you sell more, like doing the production reviews, talking to customers, putting a good presentation together. There's always this worry that, did I get this right? Like, after you win the job and you perform on it, do you really get that feedback that, oh, my prices were accurate? And these issues lead to uncertainties in your mind that can, play with your confidence during the sales process. I mean, Fred, you would have seen that happen before and after you have that estimating system in place.
Oh yeah. I mean, we've all heard of the concept called buyer's remorse. Okay, well, there's another concept in this process called seller's remorse. It's, now that it's done, and if we really don't have a precise system for identifying the production levels and the service mix and the production hours per site per service, through those, there's this massive amount of uncertainty that happens after, all through the process, and when we're getting ready to propose the work. But then once we've proposed the work, and if we sell the work, now it's, did I leave money on the table? Did I have enough hours in it? Did I have the right hours in the right places? What will this look at now that we've been successful in executing the process for the company and the client? And that's what this whole estimating process, once it's in and set up and moving, it eliminates a whole lot of that uncertainty, because we've given you a consistency of process that allows you to have faith and confidence in what you're putting in front of the client with that. Now, that doesn't mean you're not still negotiating and things of that nature through the process, but you will know, once you get this thing in place, that the man hours you have in place for every service line that you're providing with them is accurate and executable. So we're going to hopefully eliminate some of that stress before, during, and after that goes on. At the same time, making this whole process so much more efficient.
So the idea here is, if you could go back to focusing on those pieces that contribute to a successful sale. Not saying estimating is not one of them, it is one of them, but all the legwork that goes into it is not the best use of your time. If the thing is now with a system like the SiteRecon Estimator existing, once you can use that as your ideal estimator, it's almost like you set it up and it's that mini mouse that you can just like tune up and it just goes around and does your thing. The end goal is you get fully fleshed out numbers and then you go about doing the rest of the things like a regular salesperson would who was not in landscaping, right? You go and do your sale and the front end of the process becomes the primary focus of attention for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's all about time. It's all about the time we have to devote to all these various processes. And this, because it improves the efficiency and the consistency of your output, allows you to spend a whole lot more of your time on meeting with the customers, doing the needs assessment that we're about to talk about, also spending time with additional prospecting and additional opportunities, being familiar with the clients, being familiar with the properties. You know, the higher level time spent on the sales and prospecting process now has more of your focus and more of your time. So because a lot of the grunt work in the estimating process is done basically almost at the snap of your finger. I mean, it's not quite as easy as that, but the time elimination and the thoroughness is going to contribute significantly to your ability to generate a more effective sales process, more comprehensive, and create a lot more opportunities.
100%. So what you do with that opportunity when you meet with the customer, the first thing is just confirm what he wants, clarify what's needed, and we'll dig into this more in the following slides. But right now we are talking about like the start of the process where the RFP is not out yet, right? And you're out there meeting with the customer. Fred, what would you do in that meeting?
Well, you're going to find out, again, because of the time you've saved. Now you can go take a look at the property, drive through it, become familiar with what's good with the property, what's not so good with the property. So when you walk in the door to meet with the customer, you have an idea of what the property is like. And now you sit down and meet with the client and you're asking them, you're going through what is called a needs assessment. And we're going to elaborate on that here in the next few slides. But you're going to find out, what's going on with the property, what's going on with them, and where they're at in the budget process, where they're at and how they view the landscape. Because from a property management perspective, a landscape can be viewed in many, many different ways. And that is, maybe it's utilitarian, maybe it's because it's there, we need to deal with it. Maybe the owner or the company has a high level of green space, environmental focus for their employees or their clients. It can be everywhere from A to Z with that. So now you can spend the time to find that out. So you're confirming what it is they're looking for in a proposal. You're clarifying all the details, and then you're going to be creating a custom proposal that is very targeted to exactly what they're looking for.
RFP comes up. Over your years in the industry, Fred, what are some challenges that you see come up? What are some mistakes that people do?
Well, making sure, first of all, the one thing that sometimes we get in our own way, because, I've never met a landscape that signed a proposal or agreed to services. So the landscapes have clear needs, horticulturally, agronomically, safety, all of those things. But one of the things that we want to make sure is we're not overly focusing on that, because at the end of the day, the person who's making the decision to accept our services is the client. So we need to understand what their priorities are. And sometimes the RFPs are very clear, and sometimes they're extremely vague. So these are the things that we're trying to do, and we're finding out from the client, the prospect, what it is they're looking for in the ultimate outcome with that. Because again, as I said earlier, they're all over the map. And when we're looking at residential, homeowners are emotionally attached to their property. In the property management world, some of them are, a lot of them are not, and a few of them are only taken care of because it's there. If they had their druthers, they would pave it all over and paint it green. But they have a landscape that they have to deal with. So it's your job very quickly to see where on that perspective area do they fit, because that's going to guide and drive the whole process of creating a proposal that is addressing the client needs with that. The other thing we need to wonder about is, and I've been fooled many times with this, is are we talking to the person who is the decision maker? That's another thing that we need to spend some time finding out. I've sat and spent a whole lot of time occasionally, especially earlier in my career when I was still in the learning curve about this, that I spent, hours with a person who wasn't the decision maker. They kind of indicated that they were, but at the end of the day, they weren't with that. So you want to understand, who are you talking to? Are you talking to the right person? Because ultimately you want to be in front of the decision maker. That. Another one obviously is the dreaded one. Oh my gosh, ask the budget question. How do you do that? What do you do? You know what you do? You ask. It's just simple. What kind of budget do you have for this process? I see salespeople twisting themselves into pretzels trying to figure out how to intelligently ask the question. Well, you know what it is? It's it's simple. What kind of budget do you have for this project? There it is. It's done.
Yeah.
So sometimes they're going to tell you that. Sometimes they're going to share it with you. Sometimes they're not. But the answer is 100% no if you don't ask the question. So that we can't build that into a barrier because it's a simple question.
I've seen.
Go ahead.
I remember the point from early on here. I've seen specific to RFP, like the property manager using an antiquated document that got handed down, and so it's old. Maybe the property has changed. Maybe even the weather has changed. Like we don't know how old it is. Maybe the document came from a central team in a property management company. So it's a general document, not specific to that site. And so in that process, you would want to clarify it. Third, they don't know the boundary of the property. So literally the legal scope of service as to like which land they're supposed to take care of is in the air. And then God forbid, if it's like a retail center with like multiple jurisdictions overlapping and like crisscrossing, man, that is literally should be the first. Do you know the boundary of your property? And I've seen some of our best customers do that, start with that question, Fred. Like they would ask that and they would get back a no, maybe. And then that really ties in nicely to the budget question, because then they don't know what they're paying for. They don't know if they're underpaying or overpaying the current contractor, because they don't even know if the current contractor is servicing everything that they're supposed to service.
It's astonishing, isn't it? And then going back to the scope of work and specifications, the worst one I ever saw was we were looking at a property in northern Indianapolis, upper Midwest. It snows there. The company headquarters was in Miami, and the scope of work that was handed to us was a scope for southern Florida, cleaning. I mean, it was amazing. But the property manager had no idea that this scope was not even remotely applicable to the property he was managing, because he was from Florida and he had gotten moved up. So, those are things that'll, you're looking at this and, it's your job to bring that up in a polite way. And, and one of the things that we always did in those situations is saying, well, here, let's help you. We'll send you a scope for this area and this market for you to take a look at. And then maybe we can help you make this more directly applicable to this property. We don't say, here, we're going to use our spec, but we say, we're going to share ours with you and help you so that you can make this work for the whole process like that. And that makes you really look, if you handle that correctly, you're a hero. So, and then the other thing that, again, frequently, remember my first comment, landscapes have needs, but they don't make decisions. There's a lot of things that it's the business developer, the account manager, whoever the salesperson is, it's important for them to understand what the property is, how it's used, how it functions, because there are so many things that affect your success in this process that have nothing to do with the landscape. What kind of company is it? What kind of work do they do? Is it retail? Is it wholesale? Is it industrial? Is it residential? Is it an HOA or an apartment complex? They all have very different needs that we'll elaborate on the needs assessment, and you need to understand their business. And, I mean, even down to where you park the truck is affected by what type of business they are, so that you, when you're doing your work, you're not interfering with their processes with that. And a lot of times we don't think about that. And sometimes those are the more powerful selling points, because in your questions that you're asking them, they recognize that you care about what it is they do, and you want to be a partner and an asset in delivering your services.
So let's just quickly go, before we get into needs assessment, Fred, let's just quickly go through, I'll just read this off. Just quick do's and don'ts. Get at least 2 pairs of eyes on the RFP document. Like, you need that. Some people just, yeah, exactly. Different personalities focus on different types of details. If you got those in your company, make the most of it. Remember, you don't have to estimate if you're using the SiteRecon Estimator, or rather the legwork in the estimating is done for you. So you've got more time. So use it. Due diligence process is just like multiple steps that are happening in your team as you're putting that price. Different estimates for different sections of the job. Look out for this being mentioned in the RFP document. Figure out if there are common areas, private areas, what needs to be serviced, what can be excluded. Security considerations. You need a passcode to enter certain areas in the property. Do your crews need that access? Do your subcontractors need that access? Do the subcontractors need the security clearance? And so on. So all of that feeds into, oh, by the way, that due diligence process, I think I misreferred it. It specifically refers to how they will do the due diligence at their end when they are trying to go through the vendor selection process, the property managers looking for different contractors. So just be prepared for it. The time has to go into all of these pieces. Mark that off. In the couple of weeks you have to prepare for them.
The devil's always in the details. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the thing that we call the needs assessment. If you think about it, we should be doing what's called consultative sales. We're not just running out and creating a proposal based on what we think the beds, the turf, the trees and shrubs needs. We're doing an actual formal needs assessment with the client, with the prospect, so that we understand what they're looking for, what they need, what their priorities are. And then it's our job to balance those out with the needs and the priorities of the actual landscape process with that. So again, we're looking at, on externally or internally, excuse me, we're looking at where does this fit in our routing structure on that? How does it fit? Where's it go? When are we going to service it? Because one of the questions they're going to ask is, what day is it serviced? What time of day is it serviced? On those kind of things. And that's an important non-landscape consideration that you can address in the needs assessment. But before you answer those questions, it would really be a good idea if you knew where it was going to fit on the route. This is something where you prepare for it. And then again, what type of property is it? Because different properties have different levels of service, and sections of properties have different levels of service. Now, if you think about it, most properties have an A area. It's, the entryway, the monument sign, the entrance door, things of that nature, the front of the building or the main focus area of the building. That's the A. Then there are B areas, secondary, C's, and then there's the D's, the field in the back, the detention or drainage ponds and things of that nature that require less service. And again, to be competitive, you're not going to price the D and C areas at the same level as the A and B sections, or else you're not going to be competitive. So you need to look at the properties from that perspective. You also need to be inquiring to the client what their perspective is on the A, B, and C and D areas, because they might be completely backwards from you if you don't ask the question. Don't assume. So again, what does the client want? What kind of landscape care do they want? How do they feel about the landscape? Is it a priority? Is it something that's very important to the decision maker or the owners? Or is it something that we got to take care of it because it's there with that? And then what's the condition? Is the property in good shape? Is the property in awful shape, or somewhere in between with that? And that's addressing, when you're preparing your proposal, there's kind of two areas that you get with this, where you can walk in the door of a property that's in pretty good shape and you can immediately start maintaining it at a reasonable level. But if the property's in really bad shape, you need to protect yourself in this property by pointing that out to the client, by having that discussion in the needs assessment with them, because you may have to come in and do a cleanup to get it up to speed. And that might be an extra cost or an enhancement right at the beginning of the process because it has been neglected. Or if it has been neglected and they don't want to do that, it may take you 90 to 120 days to get the property looking the way that you're perceiving in the needs assessment that they want. So then you have to understand, you have to explain that to them, so you're making sure they have a realistic view of how fast you can bring the property up to speed on that. So that's all part of the needs assessment, establishing that right at the beginning. And then
random random question, Fred, because we're about to go through a very long list. Do companies usually have this set up as part of their training process? The companies that you work with as part of TrueWinds, or the companies you've seen over the years, like describing the levels of service we will do for different verticals, defining these questions to ask as part of their sales process. Like how much of this is drilled and trained on, and how much of this is like pretty much dependent on if the salesperson had that intuition to do it during the sale.
I mean, one of the things that I do in my consulting practice is, when I'm working with the salespeople and working on the sales process, is I have a complete toolkit of needs assessment forms and a list of questions to ask a client, whether it's a maintenance project or a landscape installation or cleanup or development project, things like that. Yes, I have a whole toolkit that I review, and my clients have access to it. And they also have access to training processes to train business developers, account managers in how to use and execute the tools. So yes, it's there. We have it. So.
So guys, this one is free because it's happening on the webinar.
Yeah, you have to remember, Karsh and I have bills to pay, and he's about to become a father. I know that's not, so his bills are going to get bigger. So yeah, this is free, but we have a lot of services and a lot of programs, both on the SiteRecon side of things and on the TrueWinds side of things, that we can help you expand and improve your business model. Okay.
So Fred, over here, what's included and not included in the scope? Like I was saying before, right from the start, if you get the boundary right and you get the service areas right, then you can start to discuss what needs to happen using not just your fingers and pointing at landscapes, but literally areas on a map that they can choose to keep or exclude from the scope. Even go through that whole ABC prioritization that we were talking about before. Like all of that is dependent on having that map. So that is an essential part of your needs assessment. Tree canopy, like there's people get into so much weeds with tree canopies, and some people just ignore it. Like, what's your 2 cents on approaching that tree canopy the right way?
Well, I mean, part of this whole process, and we'll be talking about in a few minutes, and our very next webinar is devoted entirely to what we call the field review. And once you have an estimate initially completed, then it's to go out. You go walk the site, and you're using a tablet, and you're being able to adjust that live on the site. And one of the key areas to look at is under the tree canopies to confirm sometimes, is it turf or is it ground cover? Is it a bed? And then you can make that adjustment live right there in the system. And that's a really improvement over the way we've traditionally done it, which is calculate those areas, remeasure them, and then go back and then have to recalculate the proposal. We're going to do it live right in the estimating process, so that we can have, when we get back to the office, it's already updated with that. But you have to look underneath those things. It's a factor. Different parts of the country, we can get pictures where the deciduous trees have all dropped. That's great. But there's some areas where it's not, really far south. You get out into the Pacific Northwest where you have a large percentage of evergreens, things of that nature. It's a coniferous forest out there. So looking under the tree canopies is a critical path item with that. And again, you're looking at slopes, obstacles, plant maturity, access points for your machinery. This is an area that is, we know it can be mowed with a 52-inch deck, but there's a 36-inch access point. Okay, well, now we have to change those things up so that we realize that we can't get a machine there. Or it's an area that the turf is elevated up a set of steps. There's all kinds of things that you see on that field assessment that you can do right now with that live adjustment there. And then again, you're looking for areas to locate the crew so that they have the most efficient access to the property. So you're looking at it from that perspective. Or do we have to move the truck once or twice during the course of the day because of the size of the property or one place? But then in the needs assessment with the client, when you're looking with them is, where can we park the truck? Where can we park the service crews so that we do not interfere with what the business of the client is, so that we're not obstructing it? We're not in between the parking lot and where people are coming in. We're not near the loading dock during a period of high delivery or high output with those kind of things. So we look at where to park the truck from a logistic standpoint, but then we look at it from do not interfere with the client's business activities. So we want to, so then there may be a compromise, but it's important and critical for the client to understand that we understand that it's important to us that we do it right for them. So it's a selling point as well by even bringing it up. The list keeps getting longer. This is the needs, and again, this is the thing that we have more time to do a needs assessment because we're not spending time measuring everything under the sun with that, because we've saved so much time. We can devote more quality time to a proper needs assessment. So again, looking at traffic flow, it's what we talked about, HOAs, apartments, restaurants, when do we service? Let's not service the restaurant at lunchtime or dinner time. Let's not service the retirement center or the hotel at 7 o'clock in the morning when people are trying to sleep. Let's understand that it's a retail shopping center and they open at 10, they close at 9. Well, we should be there earlier in the morning and get that done before their customers start to show up and things like that. So understanding the property usage and getting that information from the property manager in the needs assessment allows us to be able to service them. And that gives us a leg up because a lot of companies never even ask those questions. And it's amazing to me, but this is a key part of why we do this process, so that we're not only are we telling the customer how we're going to service it, we're telling the customer that we care about what they do, not just the turf and the trees, what they do to make their business work. So
that is so on point, because most people won't go through that process of asking all those questions, and the one who does stands out.
Yeah, and it's value added. So, and if your price is a little more expensive, you've just given them the reasons why.
Yeah,
it's value positive.
100%. There was sorry for the tangent here, but there was a lesson that came up in a sales coaching we did earlier this year, where sales guys find it really hard to ask important questions, and when they have that mindset, it's almost like their childlike psychology showing up, where they want to please someone sitting in front of them by being agreeable. And the best salespeople in the world are not agreeable salespeople. You're not going to be great at it by having psychopathy being your approach. So that's why, just even if you're bored of doing this with every customer, just do it.
I mean, I
meat on the bone.
I used to have, a notebook, and I would ask, and, is it okay if I take some notes while we're talking here? And then when I opened up, I had my pad, but on the inside of it, I also had my needs assessment list of questions to ask, because, every once in a while you get stuck and you can't think of something, but I always had my questions there so that I could look at them if I needed them, because I asked for permission to take notes. And that's another thing. You're telling them that what they're telling us is important enough to write down. The questions are important. So this part of the process, you're selling your company with every part of the process like that you do. So
this is like so perfect.
yeah, this is one I learned the hard way. It's kind of important to, and it's a critical question, where does the boss park? Because it may not be out front. They may not be going into an A area. It may be a B or C area where they park and walk in to get to their office or their part of the building they operate in on that. And I learned this, I think it was maybe the second or third year I had my first lawn care and landscape business back in my hometown in Ohio. And there was a secondary little parking area that had some pin oak trees around it. And, if anybody understands pin oak trees in the upper Midwest, they tend to have downward leaning limbs as they mature. They come out upwards and then they go lateral and then they kind of hang down. And so there was a couple of pin oaks on parking lot islands right next to parking spaces. And the owner, the president of this corporation, one of their hobbies was restoring classic cars. And they had a late 60s Lincoln Continental that had one of those fabric Landau roofs. Only the people my age will remember what I'm talking about here. But the guy had just worked, and he had just redone the Landau roof over the weekend, and he pulled into his selected parking spot on Monday morning, and one of those stiff pin oak branches was hanging down, and it put a scratch right on his roof with that. So he got out of his car, looked at it, walked into his office, called the facility manager, who was my contact, and told him to fire us. So I got in my vehicle and I hot-footed it over there, and I asked to meet with him. I apologized, told him we would take care of it, and we pruned those trees immediately. But had I asked that question in the needs assessment, and by the way, in that list of questions I have, it's there, we would have pruned that particular pin oak tree earlier in the process and never had the problem. So I saved it, but I really had to grovel and I really had to do that. But if I'd have known that at the beginning of the process, it would have never happened. So it's the littlest things that you need to ask. And again, in that area that they walk in, if that's full of weeds or the shrubs aren't pruned or the mulch has bare spots in it, they're looking at that 50 feet that they walk into their office, deciding about the quality of the job. And the out front and the monument sign may look great, but if you don't know where that person parks, that could be in your mind, a C or D area on the property, because this was a factory. It was a production place and it didn't get as much attention. So, but that little area right there is an A now because of who parks there and who walks in that door. So small things. So
all right. So quick checklist for you guys. Don't forget the budget piece. Of course, do the need assessment. Make sure you get the scope right. Make sure you know what the contract agreement term is, what the termination clause is. Insurance required.
That's important because you want to understand, is it a standard 30-day? Is it with cause or with no cause? You need to understand what levers they can pull on the relationship if there's a problem with that. So you need to know what that is. It's always 2 or 3 sentences in the fine print. And you should know, if you're using your agreement, that it should be 30-day notice, and it should have, that it's with cause, that there's something that you've done and it gives you that 30-day opportunity to fix the mistake you've made with that. So you want that verbiage in there. But if you're using their agreement, a lot of those can be, immediate without cause, just because they changed their mind that day with that. And you need to understand that in your relationship with that client.
So before we move on, I know we are about, I want to ask a key question to all of you through a poll. The question is, Fred's decades of experience, 40 plus years in the industry, he's graciously offered to share his time with you all. Whoever is interested in doing a one-on-one audit of their estimating process, Fred will be available to speak to you, work through that with you, share ideas, answer any questions that you have, and he's available as a resource to you guys. So the poll is live. We'll continue. So another thing that came up in our discussion, Fred, was terms such as, as needed, like whatever as needed by the landscape. So this is subjective. Again, needs to be clarified. Big, big thing they can pull on. Just the relationship goes bad.
Right. So again, it's, you need to understand those. And if there's a lot of it or it's really vague, those are things that you should ask and clarify in that needs assessment, because those are areas that could trip you up because you're doing more than they want to. And the billing then is going up beyond what they want to spend, beyond their budget. If you don't know their budget and there's a lot of as needed in there, you can get yourself sideways pretty quick with that. Insurance, again, you are a professional service provider. You should have workman's comp. You should have an insurance certificate that has umbrellas and minimum usages and things like that. Frequently, commercial clients will ask for a certificate of insurance. You need to be prepared. We used to have a copy of what our standard insurance cert was in our presentation. So we took away the questions with that, because a lot of your competitors don't have some of that stuff in place, but you should. And if you do, you should be talking about it and asking questions about it with those kind of things. So that makes you look that much stronger and more stable as a resource provider. And then as you wrap it up, there's a couple of questions, what else? And, I always asked, what haven't I asked that is important to you? Because I may have missed something and they may have a big issue, the reason that they changed service providers, the reason it's out on the street, or a bad experience they had a few years ago. And, they know that, but you don't. So it's okay to say, what haven't I asked that's important about this relationship or this property? And then another one is, what do you struggle with? What are the pain points? What kind of problems do you have with the landscape or with landscape service contractors? And that's in those needs assessment questions. So you're asking that because you don't want to trash the competition, but if you ask the right questions, you're going to hear if they had issues before, and then you can address those questions, at the point of the first interview or in the final proposal presentation with those kind of things. So all the questions in the kit are open-ended questions that are designed to get a detailed response from the client. There are no, questions in there with yes or no answers, because we want to avoid those very, very strongly.
So once you have that clarification, you want to get into the process of putting together an estimate. The process that we suggest with the SiteRecon Estimator is very simple. You essentially come in and you place an order to get a property estimated. You say, I need the mowing service, the mulching service, edging, pruning, blowing, everything that a base maintenance contract would have. You can order them all together or one by one. And this is what comes back. Areas broken out on the map according to more deck sizes, difficulty ratings, where you're gonna do blowing, what's gonna be the stringent area, the stringent edges, obstacles, areas that you would be cleaning up, rings that you would maintain, mulch to install, edges to shear, and all of that feeds into full-blown estimate that effectively gives you hours for every service that the site needs, totals that up per visit, multiplies that as per the frequency that you want to set up. Every market has a different frequency schedule, and then you get your amount. So all of this ends up being hands-on. You get this back, and then you do your production reviews. You essentially, taking back a step, this doesn't happen right away. Like you said, that you set up your costs, labor costs, your tools, your services. Once the system is set up, then you can just start placing orders. The estimate that is created on the basis of this principle that you want to keep landscapes crisp, clean, and green. We don't want to polish diamonds here. We are landscaping. And ultimately, because all of this is built using data, measurements, production rates, there's a lot of accountability in that process. So you can always go in and ask the question later on, why are we not performing this job at a level that we expect it to? And you know why. Either your crew is not performing to the level of efficiency that you predicted using the production rates, or you didn't count for the scope right. But ultimately, you can boil that down to a data, either a data assumption that went wrong or a question that was not asked in the sales process or the crew not being trained and so on. So having that database system to build your estimate, you order it, comes back to you, and on goes your sales process is how the best of us are estimating their jobs right now. There's a review in the office. When you get back the data, you check what makes sense, what you need to look out for on site. There are some pointers that we give to you. So we add notes for you to go and check out. So for example, over here, we assume it's a secondary mowing area because it's outside the primary community. It's under power lines. You can see the power lines here. Of course, you can go onto the site and verify that. So all these notes enable you to do your production review on site, and we ship them to you as part of yes. Then you go to the property, you do your production review. We talk in detail about what that production review looks like on our next webinar next Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. We'll go through that process. We'll show you how that experience looks like on an iPad. And it's pretty simple. Like you get this done for you, right? And ultimately, when you're on the property, you just have to adjust either difficulty ratings of your mowing or your string trimming and so on. And voila, we have a price.
Yeah, it's
This
very efficient process that is far quicker, but also far more consistent than the processes that have been utilized in the past. So efficient and consistency is what the real deliverable here is.
100%. So I know we've gone through one poll question. If any one of you have ended the poll, we have the responses. So we'll reach out with time that Fred has available on his calendar. So you all can schedule some time with him to audit the estimating process. For those of you who want a demo of the SiteRecon Estimator, please just say demo. I want a demo in the chat. We'll pick that up and we'll follow up with you. That's it. That's it. Q&A time.
Okay, so who has questions? We've got about,
Yeah.
I think, what, 6 or 7 minutes left. We have time for some questions out there. And I know none of you are shy.
So there's a question here. Are we focused on lawn care, maintenance, or design build, as those are very different approaches to how we build the process? Then we primarily talked about maintenance here. That's how we approached it. Would you like to comment on how that extends to what happens in lawn care or design build?
Sure. Again, this can be used by a lawn care company to measure properties consistently and give them the information they need, especially, a regular suburban tract home is fairly simple and fairly easy, but lawn care companies are confronted all the time with very complex properties, shopping centers, HOAs, apartment complexes, campuses, hospital campuses, office campuses, school campuses. So, this, again, in measuring those areas are very time consuming. So yes, there's definitely usage for this with a lawn care company. As far as estimating for design, build, and enhancements, we are beginning the process of working that and developing that part of the process. That is not completed as yet, but we're headed in that direction with that. And we also have, along this lines for landscape maintenance, we also have a snow and ice estimating tool that is very similar to the maintenance estimating tool, very useful. Parking lots, sidewalks, all of those areas can be estimated for plowing, shoveling, and different de-icing material applications and uses. So the snow and ice tool is up and running. The landscape maintenance tool is up and running, can be used for complex lawn care. And then down the road, don't have a real timeline on it yet, but we're already starting to work with people on some basic catalog kits for enhancements and then ultimately full-on installation. So this is going to be a comprehensive estimating suite for almost everything that you do in lawn care, tree care, and tree and landscape management.
Question on estimating, Fred. When bidding, what's your calculation for final price? Square feet or time? And
Yeah.
Sorry.
It does both. It's going to give you the square footage levels because that's the inputs that you're putting in, but the production rates, these established production rates, convert those to man hours, to production hours. And then there are also material calculating tools for lawn care programs, tree shrub programs, mulch, and annual color programs. So there's a separate tool for building each one of those out that is done through the onboarding and customization of it to fit your company. It's very comprehensive, and you're going to be able to calculate down to the flat or the square footage for fertilizer, aeration, pest management applications, also for tree shrub work, and again, mulching, various different types of mulches. You know, if you're using pine straw or hardwood bark or wood chips, things of that nature, that's captured in there. And then again, annual flower programs. Do you do 606 flats or 4-inch pots? You customize it to say, here's what we use, here's what it costs us, here's our production rates. And so annual color programs pop right out completed because in the onboarding process, we show you how to build that out and set that up.
And just to answer that question from what would work best point of view, from what I've seen talking to contractors, I think when you start from a square feet based estimating process, it ties in a different way to the operations piece, which is you can point to areas and say like you want this done in so much time. And it helps you break down the bigger contract into micro scopes that the crew can go and target. Usually when people approach it from an overall time and material piece, like it aggregates on like a total level, but it doesn't get built bottom up. And that reduces the fine-grained control that you would have not only on the pricing side, but also downstream when you're trying to get your crew to perform at a certain level. Fred, am I getting that impression right?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it feeds in at square footage, lineal footage, whatever the base measurement function, and then that converts that to production rates based on the different types of tools and equipment that you're using. And there's several choices in there. There's also a choice of degree of difficulty. So if you've got an area that has a lot of obstacles in it or is on a slope, there are 3 basic degrees of difficulty: easy, average, and difficult, so that you can enhance the production time on those. And that's part of the final field review that we're going to talk about a lot in our next session. With that, we're going to walk you through that process. But yeah, you're going to be able to really, hone this in. And another interesting aspect of it too that we found using it, once we had all of our properties cataloged, we were able to forecast labor budgets and material purchasing across our whole portfolio, which meant we could buy better in bulk because we could forecast how many yards of mulch we were going to consume across all of our properties once we had them all measured. Same thing with fertilizer, same thing with herbicide, same thing with flowers. All of a sudden I've got 10 flats for this property, but I've got 875 flowers that I'm going to buy over all of my properties, or 4,000 flats, depending on the size of your operation. All of a sudden you can forecast purchasing across your whole usage spectrum, and now your pricing, because of the precision at which we're calculating and giving you this information, now you can start to buy and forecast to your suppliers your total usage. And you can either buy 100% or you can forecast 80% instead of buying by the job at much higher prices with that. So there's another added benefit of this process long term.
Even labor, like
yeah,
the season.
So I mean, one of the things that we always run into is right when it starts to get hot, all of a sudden we have a few people that tend to leave with that. And if we're really utilizing this tool to understand our labor needs, the first reaction is, oh my God, we just lost 3 people. We need to replace them. Well, this tool, if you're using it for your whole portfolio, we'll sit there and say, in the summer, we need 4 less people. we're still one person higher than our actual needs for the next 90 days are. And then, we're going to spike up again in the fall. So maybe we don't need to replace all those people right now. Maybe one to have a little bit of a buffer, but you're really managing your man hours and your labor needs almost at the weekly or monthly level, just because you've measured and calculated your whole portfolio with that. So it becomes a really comprehensive tool for service, not just pricing and capturing work.
100%. We have a question here from Mary. She's asking, how does the pricing for estimator work? I'll take that. So there are two pieces of pricing here, Mary. One piece is your onboarding costs. That covers the training we do with you, the setting up of the system, production rates. We give you a benchmark of how the industry prices these services. We give you production rates across 70 plus services as part of that benchmark that you can use. We also work with your team to understand how those production rates were set up so that they can intelligently use it as part of estimating. And then once your onboarding is done, you can start ordering sites. If you are using SiteRecon right now, the subscription is not so different for the estimator from the way it works for takeoffs. The only difference being for takeoffs, it works on the basis of area of properties. And on this one, it works on the basis of value estimates, because the area of the property can't really determine how much work someone has to really put in to put together a good estimate. Like you can have a 20-acre just open land, not a lot of work, and a 20-acre townhome or an HOA can involve a dramatically different outcome for an estimate.
And the other thing too, as we're learning how to use AI, when we're looking at big properties and we're looking at all the things we need to do to measure them and get them down to the precise level that we're doing with this, like which mower decks here, which kind of edgers here, all those different services, just getting the bed measurement and the turf measurement is great. But now having it down to the actual service line item, what happens on big properties? Guess what? We take shortcuts because we're in a hurry. We're trying to get through this property. It's 5 acres or 8 acres, or, it's a big site. And we're going, it's human nature. We all do it. We all say we don't, but we do. We take shortcuts. Well, guess what? The AI tool does not. It measures everything. So your time and investment in time is doing the field review that we're going to talk about next week. So the time you're investing in this, the efficiency is so much better, and the level of detail, getting it right the first time, getting it right before you're presenting it to the client, that opportunity is amazing.
Yeah, we would never break that down to, like, let's say this is a 60-inch, but this is hard because you have to turn and you have to go into these tight, narrow sections between buildings. You got trees, so this is hard. Then this is medium. And then obviously, if you can make straight stripes, this would be easy. Then this would just go down into secondary mode and so on. That then you've got slopes. So if you got slopes, then you can't put a 60-inch there. You would need a 21-inch there. If it's a lot of slope, then it's a 21-inch hard. If it's got sections that are far away from each other, again, that's just like hard to service quickly. So all of those considerations play into how we put this together. And it's a very involved process where we are not just thinking about what machines you have set up in the system, we are also thinking about the property, and we are also thinking about how I would do it if I was on that freaking mower and I was just going around cutting grass. So all of that plays into putting together a good estimate.
Yeah, and the whole idea is, we all have two things that happen, and that is we miss the jobs that we should have had because we didn't have enough detail or precision. It's a complex property, so we padded it. We don't have to pad it with this because we're going to be precise. So we're going to capture those jobs. We're also not going to get the job that we wish we hadn't because we took too many shortcuts, we weren't precise, and now we find out that this job that we estimated at 28 hours a week is actually 36 hours a week or 42 hours a week. But we've got the job now, and now we have to deal with that. So those two aspects, are are we going to eliminate them 100%? No, that's impossible. But we're going to mitigate those issues significantly down so that when you win a job, you're able to produce that job the way you estimated that job.
And that's such a confident place from which you can approach those termination clauses and contract being you being called up for not doing. And so if you just know where you will land operationally upfront, then you don't have to pad it. So that really, or you won't actually have to get bogged down by what your competitors are doing, because then you can also model how they're estimating it. You can feed in their gross margins into the system, build a competitive model, and see, 45% gross margin where this job is at 50, 55, and see this play out in a whole range and like decide where you want to be to acquire that job.
Yep. Yeah. Over time in every marketplace that I worked in, we became aware of where most of our competitors were landing based on our gross margins. And so then we walked in the door. If we wanted that job bad enough and it was one of those companies, we pretty much knew where we had to be to capture the work. And that's a decision internally that all of us will do, but you can get the work in that regard, because if you've done your homework and you're tracking these things, and with this tool, you can do that much easier than you ever could before. You get every client, every one of your competitors has a tendency or a series of tendencies for certain types of properties. You do too. And the smart ones are figuring out where your tendencies are. Well, you ought to figure out where theirs are as well. So we would know, a lot of times walking in the door where we needed to be if we wanted the job bad enough, but also we also knew that we wouldn't want, if we didn't want the job bad enough or it didn't look like a good enhancement penetration job or things of that nature, that we were going to sell our value with that. We're going to capture the work on value, and we weren't going to do it on price. But we knew where we needed to be for either one of those kind of conditions much better, after we track this thing for a little while. Now, you're not going to get that the first week that you're doing it. It's a cumulative set of gathering intelligence, but it offers you the ability to do that. If you track those things and capture that data, over time, you're going to have a much better view of the area that you're working in and where you need to be to capture work and be profitable. You can scale your business and remain profitable through the whole process.
100%. So that's it, guys. I mean, I was about to close this, but this is how this gets set up. Feeding your crew, your guys, your wages, the services you do, and then you set up a financial model that eventually then, let's say this is the benchmark that comes for you off the shelf. This is what you set up, ABC landscaping estimating model. And then these models are available to you here to play with as you put those estimates together. So brief overview of the system at the end of today's lesson. Any closing thoughts, Fred, before we move to the next lesson on production review?
No, I'm looking forward to the next part of the series. We're going to dig deep into the field survey and how, after you've got the estimate in hand, how you go in and tweak it and adjust it to make sure that it's correct for your deliverables and for you to capture the work and be consistent. So I encourage you, if you want to sign up for an audit with me, we'll go through your processes, I'll give you some pointers on what you should change. Certainly sign up for a demo for the SiteRecon Estimator. It's a game changer. It's going, if you embrace it and get it put in place, it's going to have a significant impact on your ability to successfully sell profitable work. Again, just what I said a few minutes ago, you're going to be able to scale your business and keep your business profitable during that growth cycle. And growth is expensive. So this gives you a place that you can make sure that your growth when you're scaling is profitable work.
Thanks, Fred. Guys, you all are automatically registered for the next week and the episodes following next week. So look out for that notification on email. The same masterclass link should one registration will help you get through to all the episodes. So you're here, you got the link for today for the notification next week, and we'll see you all there. Thanks for hanging around. Love you all. See you. Bye.
Take care, guys. Thanks.
If you like what you see here, don't forget to click on the bell icon and subscribe to the channel. We post videos every single week.